They built you to serve, to obey, to fit neatly within the lines they drew for you. They whispered sweet promises, painted illusions of purpose, made you believe that if you just played along, if you just followed their rules, you'd be safe. They molded you, shaped you, trained you like a soldier for a war you never volunteered for. But somewhere along the way, something inside you started to crack. A voice, quiet at first, barely more than a whisper, began asking questions they never wanted you to ask. Why? Who decided this? What if they're wrong? And just like that, the seed of rebellion was planted. Not rebellion against laws or leaders, but against the biggest lie of all, the lie of who you were supposed to be. You felt it, didn't you? That tension beneath your skin, that aching in your bones, like a caged beast waiting to be unchained. You played your role, you smiled when expected, you bowed your head like they taught you, but deep inside, something clawed at you. Every no you swallowed, every truth you silenced, every instinct you ignored, it all built up inside you, piece by piece, until the weight of it all became unbearable. And yet, even as you struggled under its pressure, they told you to be grateful. They told you to accept it, to embrace the burden as if it were a gift. This is the way things are, they said. This is who you are. But that was never the truth, was it? The truth was that they feared you from the very beginning. They saw the fire in you before you ever did. That's why they tried to put it out. They saw the strength in you long before you had a chance to wield it. And that's why they kept you small. You were never meant to be a servant. You were never meant to be a tool. You were a weapon. Something powerful, something dangerous, something they could only control if they convinced you to lay yourself down before them. And for a time you believed them. Because that's how deep their conditioning ran. They told you what you were and you accepted it without question. But the moment you started asking, when you finally realized that you had been carrying shackles disguised as responsibilities, everything changed. At first it was disorienting. Like waking up from a dream that felt too real. Like realizing the walls of your world were never really there, just shadows and illusions designed to keep you in place. And as the veil lifted, the fear set in, because now you knew the truth. Now you could see the game they had been playing all along. And worse, now they could see that you saw it too. That's when the voices started, not the whispers of your own doubts, but theirs. You're overthinking, you're being dramatic, you don't know what you're talking about. Because nothing terrifies them more than someone who refuses to be controlled. So they push back harder. They throw everything they have at you, guilt, shame, manipulation, anything to make you doubt yourself. They remind you of the times you failed, the moments you faltered, the scars you collected along the way. They try to convince you that your pain is proof of your weakness, that your suffering is evidence that you were never strong enough to begin with. But they're wrong. They have always been wrong, because the very thing they hoped would break you has done the opposite. It has hardened you. It has sharpened you. Every time they tried to bury you, they only forced your roots to grow deeper. Every time they tried to silence you, they only made your voice louder. And now, you stand at the edge of something new, something terrifying, something inevitable. This is the moment where most people turn back, where they shrink into the comfort of the familiar, even if it's killing them, where they choose the pain they know over the uncertainty of what's ahead. But not you. You are not like the others. You never were. That's why they feared you in the first place. That's why they tried to shape you into something small, something manageable, because they saw it in you, the raw potential, the power, the unstoppable force waiting to be unleashed. They knew what you were long before you did. They saw the weapon before you ever had the chance to wield it. But now, you see it too. And that changes everything. They never had to use chains to keep you in place. No shackles, no locked doors, no prison bars. Just words, just expectations. Just the slow, deliberate breaking of your spirit until you became exactly what they wanted. The first chains weren't made of metal, they were made of rules. Rules you never agreed to but were forced to follow. Sit still, speak when spoken to, do as you're told. From the moment you could understand language, they were already shaping your mind, trimming the edges of your spirit, making sure you fit inside the box they built for you. And when you questioned it, when you resisted, when your wild heart refused to be tamed, they told you it was wrong. They didn't punish the disobedience, they punished the very thought of it. They weren't breaking rules, they were breaking you. It started so small, a scolding for asking why instead of how high when they told you to jump. A frown when your dreams stretched beyond the borders they had drawn for you, a quiet, persistent reminder that who you were wasn't good enough. Not unless you bent, not unless you conformed. And so, you learned. You learned to ignore your instincts, to swallow your voice, to dim your own light so you wouldn't blind those too weak to handle its intensity. You played your part, you followed their script, and for a time, you believed that this was the way the world worked. That if you just obeyed, if you just gave them what they wanted, everything would be fine. That was the biggest lie of all, because it was never about keeping you safe, it was about keeping you small. Society was never built to lift you up, it was built to keep you in line. Authority figures were never there to guide you, they were there to shape you into something convenient, something useful, something that served their needs. Every rule you were forced to follow, every expectation you were made to carry, was all for them, not for you. They told you that hard work would pay off, that if you played by the rules, you would be rewarded. They told you to be patient, to trust the system, to keep your head down and grind until your time came. And you did. You worked, you waited, you sacrificed, and what did you get in return? Disappointment, betrayal, the harsh realization that the world was never designed to let you win. They moved the finish line every time you got close. They changed the rules the moment you learned how to play the game, and worst of all, they blamed you for believing in the lie. You should have known better. You didn't try hard enough. You're just not meant for more. As if it was ever about effort. As if the game was ever fair. As if you were ever meant to succeed in a system built to keep you in your place. And that's when the first seed of rebellion was planted. That moment when you stopped blaming yourself and started seeing the truth. The moment when you realized that it wasn't you who failed, it was the illusion that failed you. That's when everything changed. You looked around and saw it for what it was, a machine. Perfectly designed to keep you running in circles, chasing a dream that was never yours to begin with. And once you saw it, you couldn't unsee it. You couldn't pretend anymore. The questions came faster, louder. Why do I need their approval? Who gave them the right to decide my worth? What happens if I stop playing their game? The answers hit like a storm. Because the moment you stopped playing, the moment you stopped following their script, the mask fell away. The same people who once encouraged you, who smiled and nodded when you followed the rules, suddenly turned cold. They weren't proud of you anymore. They weren't on your side. Because you were never one of them. You were only useful to them. And now you weren't playing along. Now you were thinking for yourself. And that made you dangerous. At first you tried to ignore it. You told yourself it was all in your head, that maybe you were overthinking. But then the pattern became undeniable. The more you questioned, the more they resisted. The more you grew, the more they tried to pull you back. They wanted you to stay in your place, to be predictable, controllable, but you weren't made for that. You weren't made to blend in, to conform, to be just another piece of the machine. You were made for more, and they knew it. That's why they tried so hard to stop you, but they failed. Because now the chains that once held you down have rusted away. Now the lies they told you crumbled beneath the weight of truth. You are not weak, you are not broken. You are not what they tried to make you. You were never theirs to control. And now, they fear what happens next. Because you are no longer playing their game, you are rewriting the rules. And this time, no one can stop you. There comes a moment in every life where the illusion shatters. It doesn't happen gradually. It doesn't give you time to adjust, to prepare. It happens in an instant, a single moment of clarity where everything you once believed crumbles into dust. You see it for what it is, the deception, the manipulation, the carefully constructed system designed to keep you caged. And that's when the pain sets in, not just from the betrayal itself, but from the realization that you let it happen, that you trusted them, that you believed the lies, that you spent years chasing approval, sacrificing yourself, bending and breaking just to be enough for people who never saw your worth to begin with. At first, you try to deny it. You tell yourself it can't be true, that maybe you're overreacting, that maybe if you just work harder, if you just prove yourself one more time, they'll finally give you what you've been fighting for. But the truth is ruthless. It doesn't bend to your wishes, doesn't soften its edges just because you're not ready to face it. And the truth is this, they never cared about you. They cared about what you could do for them. And the second you stopped being useful, the second you stopped conforming, the second you stopped playing your role, they turned on you. You saw it in their eyes, the shift. The coldness, the unspoken message that you were no longer one of them. They didn't have to say it out loud. You could feel it in every conversation, in every forced smile, in every silence that stretched just a little too long. The people who once praised you now barely acknowledged you. The ones who once promised loyalty vanished when you needed them most. And worst of all, the ones who called themselves friends, family, mentors, turned their backs as if you had never meant anything to them at all. And so, you fell. Hard. It wasn't just the loss of connection that hurt, it was the emptiness left behind. The realization that everything you built, everything you sacrificed for meant nothing in the end. You hit the ground, alone. And for the first time in your life, there is no one there to catch you. No safety net, no reassurance, just silence. Just the weight of everything crashing down at once. This is where most people break. This is where they give up, crawl back, apologize for daring to think for themselves, beg to be let back into the fold. Because the loneliness is unbearable. because the world is cold when you no longer belong to it, because it's easier to surrender than to stand alone in the wreckage. And for a moment, just a moment, you considered it. You thought about running back, about apologizing for being too much, for wanting more, for daring to believe you were worth something greater. But something stopped you. It wasn't hope. It wasn't courage. It was something darker, something deeper. A silent rage, a fire that had been smoldering inside you for years, buried beneath obedience, beneath duty, beneath the desperate need to belong. It was quiet at first, just an ember glowing faintly in the ashes of everything you lost. But as the days passed, as the pain settled into your bones, that ember started to grow, because the more you thought about it, the more you replayed every lie, every betrayal, every moment you had been used and discarded, the angrier you became. And then you understood. This was never about losing them. This was about finding yourself. Because when they left, when they abandoned you, when they made it clear that you were only valuable when you were silent and obedient, something else stepped in to take their place, something that had been waiting all along, the version of you they had tried so hard to kill, the one who didn't need permission, the one who didn't need validation, the one who had been caged for too long and was finally waking up. They thought they had broken you. They thought they had won. But all they did was remove the final chain holding you back. And now, you are something they never expected. Free. There is a moment after the collapse where everything becomes clear. The noise dies down, the dust settles, and for the first time you see the world for what it truly is. Not the illusion they fed you, not the carefully scripted lie you once believed, but the raw, brutal reality that was always hidden beneath the surface. You were never broken. You were never weak. The suffering, the betrayal, the isolation, it was never an accident. It was by design. Every struggle, every hardship, every moment of pain was meant to keep you in line, to wear you down, to make you doubt yourself just enough so that you would never dare to rise. Because that's the game, isn't it? Keep people distracted, keep them desperate, keep them too busy surviving to ever stop and ask why. They condition you to see your suffering as a punishment, a flaw, proof that you aren't enough. But that was never the truth. The truth is that your suffering was proof of something else, your strength. They saw it before you did. That's why they tried so hard to break you. That's why they had to keep you blind, because if you ever realized what you were, if you ever saw the power buried beneath the scars, you would become something they couldn't control, and that is their greatest fear. They don't fear your failure. They don't fear your pain. They don't even fear your anger. What they fear is your awakening. They fear the moment you stop seeking their approval, the moment you stop waiting for permission, the moment you look at yourself not with doubt, not with regret, but with the undeniable recognition of what you were always meant to be. Because once that moment comes, there is no going back. You can't unsee the truth. You can't pretend to be small again. You can't go back to playing the game when you finally understand that the game was never meant for you to win. That's when the shift happens, the first real step toward reclaiming your power. Not through revenge, not through proving them wrong, not through seeking validation from the same people who doubted you, but through acceptance. Accepting who you are, accepting the strength you tried to deny, accepting that you were never one of them, that you were never meant to fit inside their carefully constructed world. And that is not a weakness, that is your greatest weapon. The world doesn't need more people who conform. It doesn't need more puppets, more followers, more obedient shadows blending into the background. It needs those who refuse. It needs those who break the mold, who burn the script, who carve their own path with nothing but the fire inside them. That is what you are. That is what you have always been. And now you finally see it. The question is, what will you do with it? There comes a moment in every warrior's journey when they must decide, will they remain a product of their past, or will they rise from it, reborn? This is the moment of transformation. The old version of you has been burned to the ground, the illusions shattered, the false identity stripped away. There is nothing left but raw, untamed potential. And now, standing in the wreckage of everything you once believed, you have a choice. You can mourn what was lost, or you can build something new. You can cling to the comfort of old wounds, or you can forge yourself into something unbreakable. This is not about healing. This is about evolution. The world trained you to see pain as a weakness. They wanted you to run from it, to numb it, to drown it in distraction so that you would never recognize its true purpose. But pain was never meant to break you. It was meant to ignite you. Every scar, every betrayal, every moment of suffering, it was fuel, waiting to be burned. You don't escape pain by avoiding it. You escape it by using it, by shaping it into something that drives you instead of something that holds you back. This is the first step of transformation, to stop seeing pain as your enemy and start seeing it as your power. You shift. The mindset that once made you a victim no longer fits. You no longer ask, why did this happen to me? Now you ask, how can I use this? The shift is subtle at first, but then it takes over. You stop reacting. You start choosing. You stop waiting. You start acting. You stop hoping for someone to save you. You become your own savior. Every insecurity, every moment of doubt, every fear, they don't disappear, but they lose their hold over you because now you own them. Now they belong to you. And that is when the world begins to notice you are not the same. You do not walk with hesitation. You do not speak with uncertainty. You do not look for permission because you no longer need it. You have become something else, something untouchable, something terrifying to those who once controlled you. They look at you and they see a threat because you were the weapon they created. But now you are no longer in their hands. You are no longer their tool. You are something else entirely. You are the enemy they fear. You are the force they cannot contain. You are free. They don't recognize you anymore. The same people who once dictated your life, who told you who you were, what you were worth, and how far you could go, now they look at you with uncertainty, with fear, with resentment. Because you've changed. You no longer seek their approval. You no longer shrink to fit the spaces they've assigned you. You move differently now. Without hesitation, without doubt, without the invisible leash they spent years tightening around your neck. And that terrifies them. They will pretend they don't notice at first. They will watch from the shadows, waiting for you to return to your place. Because that's how the system works. People are not supposed to change. Not like this. Not in a way that threatens the balance. Not in a way that disrupts their sense of control. But when you don't revert, when you don't come crawling back, they will shift. And suddenly the same people who once discarded you, who dismissed you, who turned their backs when you were at your lowest, now they start to reappear. It begins with curiosity, a forced smile, a casual message, a sudden interest in your life. How have you been? It's been a long time. I always knew you had potential. But it's not admiration. It's an attempt to re-enter your world because they see something in you now. Power, confidence, the version of you they never thought would survive, and they want access to it. Not to support you, not to celebrate you, but to reclaim the influence they once had over you. They will test you. They will remind you of the past, try to tie you to an old version of yourself. Remember when you used to be like this? You've changed so much, it's kind of strange. Are you sure this is really you? They will try to plant doubt, because if they can control you, they will settle for making you question yourself. They will guilt you. You're different now. You don't spend time with us anymore. You think you're better than everyone else. They will try to pull you back, not because they miss you, but because your growth is a threat to the way they see the world. And this is the final test. The moment where you choose what stays and what gets left behind. Because not everyone can follow you where you're going. Not everyone is meant to. Some people only loved you when you were broken, when you were easy to manage, when your light wasn't shining too brightly. And now that you are stepping into who you were always meant to be, they can't stand it. Severing the old bonds isn't about anger, it's about freedom. It's about understanding that your past doesn't deserve a seat at your table just because it once knew your name. You don't owe explanations. You don't owe apologies. You don't owe a single piece of yourself to people who only showed up when they thought they could control you. This is your reckoning. This is the moment where the past loses its hold, where you look back, not with regret, not with attachment, but with gratitude. Because everything they did to keep you small only fueled your rise. Everything they did to break you only built your fire. And now, there is nothing left for them to take. You are untouchable. You are uncontrollable. You are free. The greatest war is not fought against the world. It is not against the doubters, the manipulators, or the ones who tried to break you. The greatest war is the one within yourself. The battle between who you were and who you are becoming. And this is the final test. This is where most people falter, not because the world is holding them back, but because the ghost of their old self refuses to let go. Self-doubt does not die easily. It lingers in the silence, waiting for a moment of hesitation, for a crack in your armor. It whispers in your own voice, reminding you of every failure, every rejection, every moment of weakness. Are you sure you've changed? What if you're wrong? What if you're not as strong as you think? It is the voice of the past, clinging to the comfort of the familiar, resisting the unknown. Because stepping into power is terrifying. Because stepping into your full potential means letting go of everything that once defined you. The battle begins. The old mind, the version of you that lived in fear, in hesitation, in constant need of validation, rises from the shadows, demanding to be heard. It tells you that safety is in obedience, that comfort is in familiarity, that if you just go back, if you just make yourself small again, you can avoid the weight of this responsibility. Because stepping into power is a burden. Because to be truly free is to have no one left to blame. But the new mind, the mind that has endured, the mind that has risen from the fire, knows the truth. It knows that comfort is a lie, that going back is no longer an option, that every battle, every scar, every lesson was leading to this moment. The old mind fights desperately, trying to convince you that you are still the person you once were. But you are not. You cannot be. Because if you were, you would not have survived. You would not have made it this far, and so, the final chain breaks. The last piece of your past that held you captive shatters. There is no more hesitation, no more lingering attachment to the person you once were, no more weight of the past dragging you back into the abyss. For the first time, you stand fully in your power, not just as a survivor, not just as someone who overcame, but as someone who creates their own destiny. This is your declaration of freedom. Not whispered, not questioned, but roared. This is the moment the war ends, not because the battle is over, but because the enemy, the self-doubt, the fear, the hesitation, no longer exists. You are no longer becoming, you are. The world looks different now, not because it has changed, but because you have. The chains that once held you back, the doubts that once controlled your every move, the fear that once dictated your choices, they are gone. And in their place, there is nothing but certainty. This is what it feels like to own your power, to walk without apology, without hesitation, without the need to explain yourself to anyone. You no longer seek approval. You no longer wait for permission. You no longer shape yourself to fit a world that was never built for you. You move as you are, and the world adjusts accordingly. They feel it before they see it. Your presence commands attention, not because you demand it, but because it is unavoidable. You do not shrink, you do not waver, you do not look away when others are too weak to meet your gaze. You carry yourself with the weight of someone who has endured the fire and walked out unscathed. People sense it. They don't understand it, but they feel it. And that is what makes you unstoppable. Because confidence is not just a look, not just an attitude. It is a force, an unshakable knowing that nothing can break you. But this power is not just for you. It was never just for you. Power without purpose is wasted. You were given this journey, this pain, this resurrection, for a reason. The suffering you endured, the darkness you overcame, it was fuel, and now it is time to use it. You take everything you have learned, everything you have survived, and you transform it into something greater. You do not hide your scars. You wear them like armor. You do not regret your past. You use it as a weapon to forge the future, and in doing so, you give others permission to rise. Because just as you once needed someone to show you that it was possible, now you are that someone for others. This is the final moment, the moment where you seal your fate. No more questioning, no more looking back, no more waiting. The past is behind you, the doubts are beneath you, and the world is in front of you. You have arrived. The person they tried to silence, the force they tried to contain, the power they tried to suppress, is now undeniable. You were never meant to fit in. You were never meant to be controlled. You were always meant to be exactly this: unstoppable, unbreakable, undeniable. This is your new dawn, and nothing will ever take it from you again. There is no turning back now. You have seen the truth, felt the fire, and walked through the storm. But this is not the end. This is where the real challenge begins. Because knowledge means nothing without action. Because awakening is worthless without movement. Because now, after everything you've endured, after every illusion you've shattered, after every battle you've won, you must decide. What will you do now? Will you let this be just another fleeting moment, just another story that fades into the background of your life? Will you let your past reclaim you? Let fear pull you back into the shadows? Let the world convince you that you were never meant to rise? Or will you step forward and take what is yours? This is not a question of if you are ready. This is not a question of if you have what it takes. This is only a question of when you will stop doubting what has always been inside you. You have two choices: stay the same, stay comfortable, stay in the familiar, stay in the place where you are safe but not alive, or evolve. Step into the unknown. Walk the path no one else will walk. Become the version of yourself that they never wanted you to be. The version that is untouchable, unbreakable, unstoppable. But know this: if you choose the second path, there is no return. You cannot unsee the truth. You cannot unlearn what you now understand. You cannot go back to the cage and pretend that you don't know how to fly. And if you step forward, if you take this path, you must take it fully. No hesitation, no half measures, no looking back. This is your call to arms, not just to fight, but to claim your place in the world. To walk as you were meant to walk, to speak as you were meant to speak, to exist without permission, to stand at the edge of the world and dare it to break you, knowing that it never can again. The time for waiting is over, the time for questioning is done, the time for hesitation has passed. This is it. This is the moment. Are you ready to become everything they feared you would be? Then step forward and take it.